Well, welcome everybody. Looks like we've got a few people signing on. I'm so excited to have you joining us today. Today we're talking about restoring your resilience. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank the North Dakota Safety Council for putting this on and getting the word out about this topic. And the council continually provides great resources for its members, and it's beyond just safety. It's about growing the people and the membership. And so this is an avenue for them to do that. My name is Dean Heffta, and some of you may have seen me at the most recent conference. I spoke several times on different topics regarding communication and leadership and coaching and lots of those things. And so I'm very passionate about the area of safety and growing people and skills. This webinar looks like we've got close to 90 people signed in right now. There's a few more coming in. Great attendance. And a little bit about me. My background is I live in Illinois, but I work with client companies throughout the US. And my objective in my relationships with the companies that I work with is really on growing the leadership skills of their organizations. I do one-on-one coaching. I help with strategic conversations, leadership development programs, custom training development, and all the things that fit into helping organizations get better. And that's my focus. I also speak, as you may have seen me at the conference. And so my mission today is to really bring some questions to the table, some insights for you as you think about these turbulent times. Each of us, regardless of our situation, the type of business we work in, the organization we work for, the place that we find ourselves in our lives, is affected in some fashion all the time by change and uncertainty, and it requires resilience. But certainly the past few months, it's become to a level that for many of us, we've never experienced before. And so we're finding ourselves looking for new ways of processing that information, new types of maps that we're trying to build. And hopefully today, part of that process, that new map making, can be uncovered for you. And my encouragement for you is, as we go along, I'm going to be asking some questions. Hopefully you have a piece of paper, something that you can use to jot ideas down. I'm going to ask some questions for you to apply to your situation. And this is going to be recorded. And so I'll be sending out a link to the recording if there's things that you want to review again. And I'll have a brief synopsis that I'll be sending to you as well, a quick reference sheet. So that's what you can expect from me. The chat room is open and on, and so feel free to make comments, jump in. A lot of people saying hello, good morning, people knowing each other. That's really cool. So take advantage of that. And at the end, if there's any stories or questions or thoughts that you want to pass along, we'll have a few minutes at the end that we'll try to dedicate to that. But really today is about you and the situation you find yourself in. And what we know is everyone is a leader. Regardless of the role that we have, we are leaders and we have opportunities to lead all the time. And so be looking for tools that can help you grow your leadership through these times, throughout the course of this. I believe, I have coaches, I attend trainings myself, and I believe whether it's a book that I'm reading or a seminar I attend, if I can get one thing that I can put to work in my world, it's made a difference. It pays off. And that's the key is first I have to hear that thing, see that thing, and then I have to put it to work. So that will be your real work, is putting an idea that seems to resonate with you to work. So what I'm going to do is I am going to shift over and share some slides. I'll probably jump back and forth between slides and me. And here we go. So restoring your resilience is our topic for this session. And each of us have come here with maybe something in particular that we're facing or dealing with that requires resilience. And, I think the good news is we've been developing our resilience our entire life. You could say that every day that we live, our entire life has prepared us for this moment. And a lot of that is about resilience. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that maybe we have to face, some of the challenges that we encounter, some different ways of thinking about challenges and resilience and issues like that. And then we'll go into 5 different practices that can help us in our day-to-day that we can focus on in dealing with those different situations that we encounter. And so I want to start off with a story. I want to start off with a story that you may be familiar with. And the story is about Ernest Shackleton and his adventure on the ship, the Endurance. Many of you have heard the name or heard the story. And I think it's helpful to start here because it gives some perspective of the power of both ambition and the need for resilience. And so it's 1914. And after some time of raising enough funds, securing a boat, getting a crew, staying from England, it left South America on a quest to cross as a journey the Antarctic in 1914. And so it was ambitious and it was uncertain. And that crew found themselves stranded shortly after that in an ice floe in the Antarctic. They faced a problem that they didn't expect, that none of them had experienced before. They didn't know how long it was going to last or what it was going to take. What they knew is it took grit to deal with every day that they faced. 28 of them in 1914 stranded on the southern tip of the world, knowing that just many seasons could be around the corner in some of the harshest environment. And so what that led to was eventually they had to abandon the ship. The ship was crushed with the ice, and they were left with some lifeboats that they could slide across the ice to different areas, finally building an encampment. And long story short, that crew of 28, finally, after much threat from wildlife and weather and all kinds of things, was finally rescued 2 years later, August of 1916. It took a tremendous amount of leadership, activity every day, moving forward, dealing with uncertainty, prioritizing, all of the things that we look at and say, that's what I need. That's what we need in this moment. Now, I'm guessing none of us have journeyed on an Antarctic expedition. That's pretty bold. But each of us at some point, maybe we're facing it now or at some point in our life, have faced something that we've been a part of. And we're going to talk about some of the lessons that can inform us in our moment now and as we move into the future. Because I think when you look at the fact that they finally, after a year and a half, had the courage to take a lifeboat and journey over 700 miles with 5 of their crew members on the hope that they would be able to find a whaling port that could lead to an eventual rescue. It's amazing. It's quite amazing and quite a story of resilience. And so I bring that as part of our backdrop as we think about how we can grow in our resilience and rebuild our resilience as we go along. I think it's also helpful to think about you don't need resilience unless you're facing adversity. And I like to look at adversity as, okay, well, we can assume what that is, but I think of adversity as simply a difficulty or a misfortune. That could be a really big one, could be a small one, could be something that I face, just for a few minutes in the morning, or it could be something that defines me the rest of my life. And when you look at that word adversity, it's tied to that word adversary. And the meaning, the origin of that word from Latin is to turn towards. Think about that. We use phrases like, I am facing my adversary. See, it's a turning towards. And so that means that I am facing something that is bringing this adversity to me? And when you think about that, we might be thinking that right now, the coronavirus or oil prices or whatever these very external factors are, is our adversary. But I'd maybe shift that around a little bit. Those might be the circumstance, that external thing that is affecting us. But perhaps our adversary is something much more specific. So take a moment. And if you step back away from the challenge of the virus that we're facing as a globe, what might be the thing that you are facing, the adversary that you have? Jot some ideas down, what your adversary might be. Now, when we are faced with an adversary, oftentimes it's unexpected. And what can happen, and I think it's helpful for us to think about what is happening in us when we're facing these moments of challenge. It is a biochemical response that our body has. And so when we step back from it and say, okay, what's really happening? We can think about ourselves, our minds, our brains, get to the cerebral level. Our brains as being really three key brains. We've got the ancient part of us that takes care of our breathing and our heart beating and all of those functions that we don't even think about. We've got the next layer up that is much more about our emotions and our feelings and our senses. And then we've got this very top level that is about processing and projecting and thinking and analyzing. It's our neocortex. And so everything seems to make sense until something unexpected comes up. And what we find out is our blood pressure doubles and our IQ cuts in half. And that's how we know our neocortex has been pushed to the sidelines. And what's taken over is our limbic system. That limbic system, you could call it a limbic takeover. It's hijacking us. We see somebody that's in this state. You hear the stories about fight, flight, or freeze. That fight or flight is really a limbic issue. And we look at someone and say, they're just not thinking clearly. They're not acting rationally. Of course not. They aren't. Their neocortex has shut down and the emotions have taken over. The challenge with that is our brain has shifted into survival mode. It just wants to get through the day. But that can lead to short-term thinking, that can lead to non-strategic decisions, that can lead to unthought out responses to situations. It can really diminish our leadership. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to be able to get back in charge of ourselves and to be able to recognize what's happening when this dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol is flowing through my body and shutting down my thinking brain and turning on my emotional brain. Because we can't stay in that state for a long time, or we can't lead ourselves and we can't lead others. We have to be able to get ourselves back. And so one of the things that can be helpful in recognizing what happens when we're in this distressing, stressful state is to have an understanding of not only our own personal, what I'll call stress style, but also of the people around us. One of the things that I help leadership teams with individuals with in my coaching comes from the science of the process communication model. And in that, NASA used it in their shuttle programs and Pixar uses it, and many global companies do training on it to help people improve their influence in communication. What we can observe is there's really 6 key stress styles that we're going to face with people. And if we have more understanding of our own tendency, we're going to be able to manage that and ourselves better. So I'm going to give you the 6. Starting in the top left, you might yourself or see somebody become over-controlling in a stressful situation. They stop delegating. They say it needs to be done my way, and I'll just do it myself and forget about it. And they take over. And the rest of the team's like, okay, fine. You're on your own, right? So each of these stress behaviors has a consequence to the people around us. That's why managing ourselves is so powerful. And it begins with this awareness. Other people you might see, they freeze. Something new, unexpected comes up and they stop. They stop getting things done. They stop moving. They might even disappear. And you say, where did Jim go? I don't know. He disappeared again. Others might whine and blame, like, why does this always happen to me? This isn't even my fault. This is so unfair. Stress behavior. You might have some people that say, hey, you're on your own, and they abandon people, or maybe manipulate the situation, break the rules to get their objectives accomplished. That's distress behavior. Others might be doubtful of themselves and wishy-washy in their decision-making and even make mistakes. That's a distress behavior. Or somebody you might see as crusading for what they believe is right, and they push their beliefs on others, and they focus only on what's wrong instead of what's right. Each of these 6 behaviors are stress behaviors and can be devastating to the health of an organization, the communication of a team. And so we need to be able to recognize them and deal with them, deal with ourselves, because all of this comes out in uncertainty. And when we think about these things that come up, it really relates to how do we process things. Processing is something that we're doing thousands of times a second. We're processing information. And when something is new and unexpected, the first reaction is, this must be a threat. And when we have threats, we might not be thinking very clearly. We shift really into that fear mode because it's threatening. So maybe we shut down or disappear or run away or attack. When we are looking at things as threats, we're likely to move into the away mode, right? We want to get away from a threat. And when we process that threat, this is an opportunity that we have. When we process that threat into a challenge, we're now moving into a toward. It's something we're moving toward. When we see a challenge, it can be inspiring to us. It can be a challenge for us to overcome. But often that challenge began as a threat. And so for us, facing things that are first seen as threats, it's stopping and saying, how do I turn this into a challenge? Take a moment and think to yourself, what's a recent threat that you actually have turned into a challenge? And think about the process that you went through. Your first reaction, threatening. You may have had fear. Challenge. You start moving into, how might we solve this? What skills do we need to develop? How can we think more creatively about it? Right? So that shift that we go through from, this is a threat, I don't know what to do, I'm going to run away, to, wait a minute, I think there's some things that we could do. You can see that threat does not inspire creativity, but challenges do. And in our lives, it's always been the challenges that have been the things that have grown our skills. I mentioned fear. When we have that threat, we can think about fear. And I want us to think about time, where we are in time. We can experience sometimes when our anxiety is, or when our frustration or our fear or our uncertainty is high, we might experience remorse or regret. And when we're in that mode of remorse or regret, we're in the past, right? We're focused on the things that we should have done or wish we hadn't have done. And what's the challenge with that? Well, the challenge is, if I'm not using that as a learning mode to deal with my future, I can become paralyzed, depressed, because what can I do about the past? There's nothing I can do about the past. The remorse of things I have done, the regret for things I wish I'd have done, there's nothing I can do about that other than the things that I can do today. The flip side of it is, when we are experiencing fear and anxiety, our mind is in the future. we're fearing an uncertain future. And we know that 95% of the things that we fear never actually come true, but it can be overwhelming. The anxiety is this chronic, ongoing sense that something just isn't right. And it's physically unhealthy when it goes on and on for us. And so for us, the challenge is, how do we be in the present, right in this moment, dealing with today, rather than overwhelmed by the fear of the future or depressed over the regret of the past? How do we stay in this moment? And that's the challenge for us when we're working with the people around us. You'll have these conversations, I'm certain. People that are maybe coworkers next to you. Maybe it's managers or employees or family members or friends. You can sense, begin looking for this, when they are living in the past of fear and regret, or stuck in the future of anxiety and fear. And what you can do is bring people closer to the present, the things that we can do today. And we'll touch on some of these in the 5 practices. So what is resilience? What is resilience? That's what we're here to talk about. When I think about resilience, it is the observable, healthy functioning during and following adversity, failure, or major environmental changes. See, adversity, we've got that adversary. Failure, our expectations weren't met. Or major environmental changes, things that are happening around us that we don't have control over, but affect us. And so when you think about that, successfully dealing and displaying resilience means that we can process stress effectively. And oftentimes when we hear the word stress, our first thought can be, oh man, that's a bad thing. I want to get as much stress out of my life as possible. But what we realize, and when we reflect, is that stress is really important to us. It's those moments between what we're experiencing and what we want to experience. There's a gap. And so whether we're building muscle, we can't get fit and healthy without experiencing stress and challenge. The same thing goes for our emotional state. The same thing goes for our mental state. We need to be challenged. The key is, can we face that challenge in a way that we feel we can deal with? And so when we deal with stress, sometimes it can turn into trauma because it's overwhelming. It's too much for us to deal with. And trauma is our way of protecting ourselves from experiencing it again. And we're going to be in that traumatic state until we figure out, how do we prevent that? So we have to think through that. We have to work through that trauma. The flip side of it, though, is stress can also be an amazing growth experience. You've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but there's also post-traumatic growth, where we go through these challenges that are at such a high level that we look back and realize that is a moment where I completely changed as a person to the positive. I realized new ways of thinking about things and doing things that I never understood. I found resources inside me that I didn't know that I had. So let's talk about, for you, reflect. What are some of the things that you, when you think about stress, have been feeling? And stress we can understand mentally. It could be, I'm not sleeping well. We can understand it physically. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I'm lethargic. Maybe I'm paralyzed. Think about what it is that is giving me indication of how I'm processing stress. It isn't good or bad. It's something for us to grow our awareness of. See, for us to grow our ability to lead others, we have to continually be working on how we tune in with understanding ourselves. We get frustrated when we're around people who really aren't aware of how they are coming off to others. That can be destructive and frustrating and add to expenses and inefficiency and turnover in our organizations because people aren't aware. So I can begin growing our organizational awareness by growing my own awareness. And it begins with reflecting on what's going on with me. Our frustration, our disappointment is going to be tied to the expectations that we had. Maybe 6 months ago, we had this big vision of how awesome 2020 was going to be because of the certain set of expectations we had. And then all of a sudden, the entire playing cards got shuffled. The game changed. Everything changed. And so we can be feeling still this frustration, this disappointment, that we're not going to be able to meet our expectations. And that's okay. That's part of our process that we have to go through when things change. And things are always changing. It's just a question of how big is the change that we're experiencing in what time of period of time. And so think back, what were the expectations that you had? Because that's what's tied to what we're feeling right now. So let's talk about what I call the 5 practices of personal resilience, things that we can be doing consciously to work forward in increasing our resilience. Practice 1, I call gather gratitude. Gathering gratitude is, I think, a multifaceted element, something that really has many different aspects to it. It isn't just being thankful. How I look at gratitude is there is an entire process that goes into it. And first and foremost, believe it or not, it can begin with our breathing. How are we being? What's going on with us, and how can we affect that in a positive way? Often when we feel stressed, we feel overwhelmed, what we look at and realize is we haven't been breathing. And a proven approach that you can use right now, I want you to we're just going to take 30 seconds and practice this. It's a technique we'll call the 7-11 breath. It's breathing in for 7 counts and breathing out for 11. If you do that 1 or 2 times, what you'll find is the ratio of slower breathing out helps us to kind of center our mind and calm, because we can't really reflect when our mind feels like it's in a blender. So we can use our breathing to kind of calm our mind. We want to do that because we want to get some perspective. It's impossible to have gratitude without clear perspective. It's hard to have clear perspective if we don't have a clear mind. So using that 7-11 breath to just kind of slow things down for a moment, calm our mind. And what we can do is, when we're thinking about gratitude, we can reflect back. This seems counterintuitive, but think back to a large challenge that you've experienced in your life. All of us have had different things that have happened, things that we've overcome, and it's easy for us to forget about that. And when we gather gratitude, we recognize that there's things that we have accomplished, overcome, faced, that we had even kind of forgotten about. It could be as simple as, when things are tough, I think back to times where maybe you're doing farm work or something that's just, man, this is terrible. And it gives you perspective. Or maybe it's a sports competition or a goal that you set that took a lot of work. You didn't know if you were going to get there. But what you found in yourself was an ability to compete, an ability to stick to something, an ability to accomplish something that you hadn't really recognized before. And so when we're facing challenges right now, it's helpful to go back actually in the past and remember the challenging times. And what comes from that is we realize those challenging times don't last forever. They're moments in our lives. And what we realize is many of the lessons that we've learned in our lives, the skills that we've developed, the confidence that we've grown, haven't come from the good times. They've actually come from the challenges. And each challenge prepares us for the next and bigger challenge. So kind of counterintuitively, we can be thankful for the challenges that we face. Some of us might be thinking, well, boy, I got a lot to be thankful for. Yeah. A friend of mine, Brian Dodge, he says, don't ask for fewer problems. Ask to find more skills. And I think that's something that we need to remember once in a while. Say, you know what, in this moment, it isn't a question of needing fewer problems. It is, what are the skills that I can develop to get through the things that I'm facing? And that's part of our journey. The other question that you can use when you think about this gratitude gathering is, I look back at the challenges I've overcome, And then I can look forward to say, what is it that I really want? See, I get a chance to be really thankful to be in a country that I have opportunities to pursue things that I want to pursue. I can pursue becoming the type of person that I want to become. I can accomplish things. I can strive for things. See, it's the pursuit of happiness that we're promised, not happiness. So what is it that I can strive towards? And so we look at this past and we look at the future and say, I have a lot to be thankful for. And just by the function of living in this country, I'm already in the top 1% of the world. When I look at the lifestyle that I'm able to live, even in the face of all the challenges that I have. So what can I do with this opportunity that I have? And part of it is continual gratitude. I can even take a moment in the morning and just write down what's one thing that I'm thankful for. Regardless of where I find myself, there's something that I can have gratitude for. Practice number 2. I call it renew purpose. Renew purpose. You know, some of you may have heard the name Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor, went through a horrible experience, obviously, and was able to write a book about it as a psychologist and really reflect on the experiences that he had. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Originally, he wrote it anonymously. He didn't want to be necessarily associated with it, but he ended up attaching his name, and it's often on people's recommended reading list because of the lessons in it. And what he believed was that as human beings, as individuals, we're meaning makers. Our goal, our purpose is to find meaning. And what he identified was the greatest source of our meaning can come from one or all of 3 areas. The first area he called work. And it's the ability to work towards something that we find significance in. That can be a very meaningful source for us, a source of meaning when we have work that we find to be a significant pursuit. But we don't have to have that. I mean, there's other sources. Another he called love. Having the opportunity to care for others, to serve others, to do things for others. And he found that in the concentration camp of being able to care for others was a great source of meaning. And the third source he found was courage in difficulty. That in and of itself being a source of meaning. He took it on as a challenge of how can I face today? Whom can I make today for? How can I get through this to see people that I care about? And so seeing the difficulty as how do I bring myself to that using courage? And when we think about courage, we think about fear, and sometimes the word fearlessness gets thrown around. I don't think there is such a thing as fearlessness. I think there's only courage. And courage is saying I can move forward in the face of fear. I recognize that I feel fearful and there's things that I'm uncertain about, but courage gives me the action to move forward regardless of that. And so thinking for a moment, take a moment and write down or think about who is it that you do what you do for? Who are you serving? There's no one right answer for this, but who are you serving? It could be serving the livelihood and trying to become the model for my children. It could be I sincerely care about each of my clients and I want the best for them and I want to do what I can to take care of them. There's many people that we can serve. And what happens when we uncouple, when we forget about who it is that we're serving, we tend to then begin looking inward. And not in a reflective way, but in a way that we're looking at how am I feeling? How am I doing? What's in it for me? Because we've uncoupled from serving others. And so that can lead to, kind of a blindness of what's happening around us. It can be leading us to make decisions based only on things that make me feel good in the moment. And often that's not getting us where we want to go. And so having clarity, who is it that I'm serving? Because what we know is people will do more for others than they're willing to do for themselves. At the same time, there's plenty that we don't give ourselves much credit for. Each of us on this call, there's 100 of us on this call right now. We have something special. We have some unique gift that we bring to whoever we're with or wherever we're at. And not only is it okay for us to understand what our gifts are, it's actually critical that we do that, because that is what we bring to the table that helps us to uniquely serve others. And it helps us to develop our purpose. See, the path to that purpose is us feeling like we can uniquely contribute. Maybe I'm great at organizing, and I can bring that to this organization, this association, this nonprofit, whatever it is. I am great at organizing. Maybe I have the ability to motivate people, or I can focus on solving little problems that other people have missed. Whatever that is, you're looking for insights from people around you to give you clues of what are you great at, and embrace that and bring it to the table. Not in a braggadocious way, like, let me tell you what I'm great at, but in a way where you're showing there's things that I believe that I can do uniquely well, and it's important that I bring that to the table. So knowing what your gifts are, and if you're not certain, talk to the people around you. You can ask simple questions like, I always am looking to get better, and I'd love to know, are there some things that you feel like I just am naturally good at? How do you see me bringing value to the team? Maybe what are some things that I'm just not that good at? And maybe my gift is on the opposite side of that. Asking for feedback, having that candid conversation can help us understand what really makes us unique. Because here's the challenge. The things that have come easy to us, we usually don't put much stock in them because we haven't had to work at them. But those are our gifts, and they feed into our purpose. Our values also come up too. What are the things that I value? What are the things that I care about? I love the story about Sylvester Stallone when he first was writing the screenplay for Rocky. He was a nobody. He had never had a screenplay purchased. He had never really acted in anything, but he had a vision and he had values of what he believed in. That was a part of his purpose. And if you've heard his story, he had $106 and he was so broke he had to sell his dog. And someone read his screenplay and they said, we'll give you $300,000 for this, but you're not going to act in it. Because he was clear on his values, his purpose, he turned them down because he knew this was his one chance. And that he would rather be there with only $106 in his bank account than not pursuing what he really valued. We know the rest of the story. He didn't settle, and he went on to create one of the largest movie franchises of all time. That's not easy. That takes courage. But it means that you're in touch with your values and things you care about. So where are we so far? We've talked about gratitude. We've talked about purpose. Number 3, this is, I believe, so important. It's clarifying the question. What does clarifying the question mean? Well, here's what I see in organizations and with individuals, any type of group. We are very eager to jump in to solve problems. We want to get into the solution. We offer advice and suggestions on what people should be doing, and I think we should do this, and I think we should do that, and I think I should do this. Right? We jump right into the opinion stage. Here's what people need to be doing. We want to solve this problem. Here's what I believe, though. We don't really solve problems. And the goal isn't to solve problems if we're working as a team. The first goal is, and the thing that can make the biggest difference and give us energy and feed our resilience and show us possibility, is actually getting more clear on the question we're trying to answer. So you can do this when you are in a meeting together. Instead of gathering people together and say, here's the problem and I want to know what you think we should do about it, taking the time when we get together and say, let's make sure that before we do anything else, we're really clear on what is the question that we're trying to answer. You can start a meeting saying, here's the question that I'm trying to answer, and I need your help in it. Or when things are uncertain, it's saying, let's not just start doing something. Let's make sure that we can really define what the problem is. And we do that through our question. So you can use questions yourself. Questions like, okay, let's step back. What's the real problem here? And physicians will tell you that there's two kinds of problems. There's what they call the presenting problem. It's the thing that the patient comes to them with. Like, oh, doc, my back is killing me. I need some medicine to get rid of the pain in my back. That's the presenting problem. And we can get drawn into that in our organizations as well. We think that the symptom is the problem, the painful back. But we also recognize when we step back, the pain isn't the problem. If the physician is wise, they recognize that they're presenting the pain in the back, but what's the real problem? We need to do more investigation. We need to really understand what is the problem. And we come to find out that maybe they have slightly different lengths of their legs, and it's creating this misalignment, which is leading to pain. And that instead of pain medicine for their back, they simply need prescription shoes or inserts to deal with the actual problem. So it's improving our understanding of what's the real problem here and not being so quick to think that we know what the problem is. There's a little bit of skepticism that I can bring to the table. And so there's different kinds of questions that we might find ourselves asking. I call them poor me questions and power me questions. Poor me, right? We hear these questions like, oh, why does this always happen to me? When is somebody going to do something about this? I mean, who's to blame for this situation? See, none of that type of position gets us closer to what the real question is that we're trying to solve, a real understanding of the issue. They're just poor me. Yeah, I can have a pity party and invite lots of people over to it. But the power questions that power me and my team forward are things like, what is it that I need to learn right now that's going to help the situation? Who is it that's experienced this before that we can reach out to with some ideas? Is there places that we haven't looked where we might find some new ideas or somebody that's been down this road? How might we step back and approach this in a different way, a way that we maybe haven't thought of yet, right? So these are questions that invite people in to the situation. And it begins with a great question. And so when we really get clear on what is the problem, we're then able to say, okay, this is the problem. This is what we want. This is where we're at. This is the question we're trying to answer. Now we've got this hairball of uncertainty between where we're at and where we want to get to. The good news is that's where the source of all creativity comes from, is that gap between where we are and where we want to get to. So we first better get clear on where are we and where is it we want to get to. That's asking a better question. What can we do next? We can begin developing possibilities. Now, what we have to face is the recognition that probably less than 5% of people, when they're in a high stress situation, actually come up with new innovative solutions by default. Our standard operating procedure is really to revert back to something that we're familiar with, something that we've seen before. And I think it was Einstein that said, the thinking that got us to this point isn't the thinking that's going to get us out of it. We need new possibilities, new thinking. And so I call these catalyst questions, using questions that get us thinking about possibilities. This is when things get excited, when it's like resilience is an outcome of doing these things. It isn't sitting there saying, I wish I was more resilient. I wish I could handle this better. It is getting in and saying, I'm going to work through these questions. And I can use these catalyst questions like, what if we tried this? Or, this might sound crazy and it's probably not going to work. But what if we tried this? I've had people say, I've brought ideas up before, but they get shot down. And so I just keep my mouth shut now. Well, what if you didn't deliver it as if it were a perfect solution? Because here's what we know. Innovations, new solutions, new possibilities come out half-baked, maybe not even a half-baked. And then if they're really going to come to life, they need to be molded and shaped. And sometimes it isn't about the solution, it's about where it leads us in our conversation. These catalyst questions can get us as a group going and raise the resilience of the people around us because they begin seeing that there's new paths that we maybe haven't uncovered yet. So you can use what I call the 20x challenge. The 20x challenge is, in this moment, with this situation we're facing, here's the question we have. Let's come up with 20 possibilities that we could employ. And what that does, people's first reaction is, how are we going to come up with 20 possibilities? Well, it's a challenge to us, and it stretches us past the first 5 ideas, the first 10 ideas, because it's helping us deal with the risk that we have, that we might, our brain's lazy. My brain's lazy. Most people's brains is by default designed to be lazy. It burns up like a quarter of our calories, and so wants to burn as few calories as possible. And so what that can lead us to do is, after we get maybe 2 or 3 ideas, we figure there's something there that's good enough. But if we challenge us and our team and say, let's list out 20 possibilities, that can get our juices going about the possibilities, and it can be energizing for our path. Practice number 5, take action and adjust. I have a riddle for you. 5 birds are sitting on a wire. 3 decide to fly away. How many are left? Some might say, well, there's only 2 left because 3 flew away. My answer is, there's still 5 birds there. I said 3 decided to fly away. I didn't say that 3 flew away. There's a difference between deciding and acting. This was something that Abraham Lincoln faced in the Civil War, his frustration with so many of his generals because they wouldn't act. They planned and they plotted and they hypothesized and they prepared, but they didn't act. And until he found Grant, whose bias was action, he questioned if they could even win. Because the plan of action that's executed today is way better than a perfect plan a week from now. And so what can help us with this? Well, one way that we can be helped with this is to understand what is something that's small enough that I can actually take action on. We can be paralyzed if the action is too big. And so what we can do at that moment is shrink it down and say, what is something small that I can move forward in? Out in the desert, in the Sahara, before we had GPS, before we really had the navigation, what they would do is they would set barrels on dunes, on sand dunes, and use those as points of navigation. So I didn't have to worry about where I needed to get 200 miles from here. I only needed to worry about getting to the next dune. Same thing happens when we think about driving at night. I don't need to be able to see all the way, but I do need to be able to take action. So I can drive to Minneapolis in the dark as long as I have lights that can show just a little bit in front of me. The same thing goes for our life. What forwarding action can I take right now that's going to move toward that thing that I want, the direction that I'm heading, the outcome that I'm trying to achieve? I love this quote from Margaret Thatcher. You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. And that goes for our lives. We can think like, oh yeah, once we do this, everything's going to be great. And you see, the key was not just taking action, but adjusting along the way. So we need to be able to be very forthright in looking for feedback to let us know if we are on track. When I'm driving to Minneapolis in the dark, if I drift over to the side a little bit, the rumble strips go off and it gives me feedback to make adjustments. Same thing goes with our businesses, our organizations. It's like we're moving forward, but we got to gather feedback along the way. And I think of it like this. Any of us can be subject to procrastination. And in the moment, we might not even think that we're procrastinating. We tell ourselves we just got to refine it a little bit more. But what procrastination can really be is, you could say that it's fear getting wrapped in perfection. We keep from taking action out of fear, and we convince ourselves it's because it has to be a little bit better. And so shrink it down, whatever it is that we need to do, move forward, take an action, and then gather feedback, adjust, and move forward with our action. So I want to do a bonus, a sixth practice, because all of this is great and powerful and meaningful when you think about renewing your resilience to face challenges and move through uncertainty. But what we know is that we can deal with it much better when we have a team that we care about. They found that we experience climbing a hill as being much easier when we do it with a friend than when we do it alone. And these challenging times are no different. Being proactive and reaching out to people, ensuring that the people around us can operate at their best selves. We want people that have, a view of possibility and a resourcefulness and a can-do attitude, because attitudes are so important. I need to be able to bring my best self, bring people into the present, focus on the things that we can do, minimize our worry about things that we don't have control over, because it's that sense of agency, that sense of control, that gives me the energy to say, you know what, we can move forward each day. And that's resilience. And so these are the six: gather gratitude, review purpose, clarify questions, develop possibilities, take action and make adjustments along the day, and remember about your team, the people around you. That team isn't just your coworkers. It's everybody in your world that you touch and that you influence. And so feel free, if you have questions or comments that you want to put in the chat box, we can bring them up for everybody. Please take a moment and think about which area here is going to be helpful for you when you think about resilience. Who is it that you can support in their challenging time? See, we get energy when we recognize that there's people that we can help. It adds to that purpose. You think about being thankful, finding purpose, understanding the clarity of the question at hand, using our creativity to uncover possibilities and taking action. All of these help us to move out of that funk, that paralysis that we can find ourselves in. A couple of things. If you want to keep in touch, be sure, if you're on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, give me a follow. Also, if you're a podcast listener while you're driving around or, doing the things that you do, my podcast is called Communication on Point. Wherever you get podcasts, you can get to it. And it's all about improving our communication and insights on that. And for anybody who has further questions that they want to dive into, 15-minute free conversation, no problem. Feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I'd love to talk with what you're finding, maybe a lesson that you got from this. I love when I get stories from people and experiences that they're having. And be sure to reach out to me. I'm here for you. And if you want to talk in greater detail, please do so. I want to thank you all for taking a precious hour of your day and investing it in coming here. Please send me a note of what you liked about it, things that you'd still like to learn about. And thanks again for the North Dakota Safety Council for making this happen. I hope everybody has a safe and productive path forward here. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.